ask you to bring anything to this session, but if you have a piece of paper and a pen handy, I do a lot of folding in my classrooms of paper because I want students to be kind of ready to be able to move into just copying something down if they don't have notes. So I usually use folding techniques. So I take a piece of paper and just fold it vertically if you even want. It's kind of like a hot dog fold, I call that. And essentially you're making two columns. You're making a crease line with two columns. So I want your task for this session is to have two columns. I know you're reading this backwards, but one of the columns will be things that you can use from this session. And I'm just going to copy this down here and paste it. So you'll make two columns, things that you can use in your own classroom, and then just notice things, just whatever. Notice what I say, what I do, what you're doing, what others are doing. Just notice things, I'm calling them. And I know that's not a word, that's why it's underlining and reminding me that I haven't spelled that correctly, but I'm going to make up that word. So try and keep track of that as we go through these 10 strategies. So I like to take pictures a lot in my classrooms, but they're old now. They're over a year old because we haven't been face-to-face in a while. And so we know what student engagement looks like face-to-face. And I use a lot of cooperative learning techniques in my classroom every day. When I learned cooperative learning techniques a long time ago, probably 30 years ago now, I've been using it, maybe even longer actually. When I first learned that and started to implement it into my teaching, it just changed my teaching. It made me a different teacher in a good way. And so some of it comes easy for me because it's taken so many years. But other strategies I still have to think about it. And so it's always a challenge for me. And no matter what level I think you're at in terms of cooperative learning. And some people think that's a cliche word that is passé, and but really it isn't. It actually will transform your teaching if you can get in some cooperative learning. It really is linked to student engagement. So this is a picture of one of my math classes 2 years ago, I guess. And you probably know that I used the mini whiteboards in my classroom. So when students would come to class, they would pick up a mini whiteboard at the front of the room, a marker and a little brush, and they would sit down at one of their group tables. So my classroom was always set up for groupings so that my interactions and student engagement could just happen more easily. And so then when we were, propelled into the Zoom environment, really almost overnight, I thought, well, how am I going to do this? Like, how am I going to take all those things that worked for me in my math classroom and try and bring them to a Zoom classroom? And so this session is 10 things that I started to just pivot, because that seems to be the COVID-19 word, the pivots that I made to bring student engagement into the Zoom classroom, using techniques that I had used successfully face-to-face. So maybe you're even jotting something down in your noticings as you look at this picture. So you notice the mini whiteboards. I think you notice a lot of engagement, if you can judge by the smiles and the fact that almost everybody is holding up their whiteboard. So, this was a really rich activity for me, and I didn't want to let it go. I felt I had to somehow mimic this strategy or these activities that I was using. So what I want you to do right now is, I think all of us are familiar with the chat feature in Zoom. So could you find that chat feature? Don't enter anything in the chat yet, please. Wait for my count. In my classrooms, I almost always do a 3, 2, 1 count and then have you hit enter. But here's what I would like you to do. I would like you to think about 3 words that describes student engagement in the Zoom classroom. 3 words that describe student engagement in that Zoom classroom. You can type them into chat, but don't hit enter yet until I do the countdown. So I'm going to pause while you think and type. Now, I haven't given you a lot of time, but maybe that's even on purpose. So I'm going to count down now, and whatever you've typed in, you'll be able to hit enter on the 1. So 3, 2, 1, chat. Let's see what you've got. Okay. I've got so much going on here. Finding my chat is always when I'm sharing. So I'm just going to stop share for a minute here so I can have a look at the chat easily. Okay, yeah. So one of the things you may not feel this because there are only 5 of us here today, but when you do this, when you have 30 people, this is explosive. Like it's a really powerful way of just everybody shout it out at once, you know, and you would see the feed just sort of build up. It was slower for me because I've got 3 screens on the go. I'll show you my setup in a minute, but yeah, so we're already starting to think about techniques that we can use. And so, yeah, student engagement means that people turn their video on or their camera on maybe. I always ask my students to, just for the first few seconds, turn their camera on and I say hello to every single one of them that I see on my screen in my photo gallery of Zoom, my Zoom gallery. So I say, hi, Jenny, hi, Jeff, hello, Sheila, you know, and I'll just start doing that really quickly. So I start right on time with a hello and that, and then I try and hit record so that they know that when I'm recording, they won't necessarily have to show their face. And I don't give anybody a hard time about not showing their face, but I just at least invite them to do that. And yeah, just sort of minimal, maybe one-dimensional. Yeah, Carl, that's an interesting way to describe it, is that it's kind of lonely, right, for us sometimes. And so silence and not having that. So chat box interaction is key. So then if you think about, I'm going to share my screen again here. If you think about then some of the challenges of getting that student engagement in the Zoom classroom, we could chat about that again. So try thinking about, again, 3, you can type these in, but don't hit enter. 3 challenges, or even 1 challenge. Good, nobody's hit enter yet. Okay, 3, 2, 1, chat. Let's see if we get a bit of an explosion, and we did. Okay, yeah, introverts, class size, time lag, like just people not participating, even in the chat, and we can't be judgy about that. I think we want to make sure that we're inclusive. Like maybe there's a reason someone isn't chatting, maybe there's a tech issue, maybe there's an introvert issue, maybe there's whatever. So I do try and have private conversations if I can with people I notice that aren't chatting. If I have a big class, I can't do that with everybody, obviously, and my classes tended to be big. the last couple of years. So but I could always get to a couple just during a pause or a break. I could chat privately to someone and say, I noticed that you weren't able to chat. Is there a tech issue? And then often someone will say something back to me. And I'll never forget one of the very first comments that I got from a student. She said, I love the chat feature because it feels like I get to talk to you privately. So I hadn't thought about that the chat feature would open up a private meeting between me and every one of my students if they wanted to. So, there's looking at the glass half full, isn't it? So some great features that we can find in this chat. Okay, so I've had you think about student engagement, what it looks like and what some of the challenges are, just briefly. But let's start with our 10 strategies now. Some of them we've already talked about or introduced. I've introduced here, and they're not in any particular order, certainly not in any order of priority, but they are in the order of how I thought about them. So maybe that's a priority, I don't know. But I'm starting with this one, the skeletal notes, simply because I want to be able to model what I would use in a class that works and helps just elicit some interactions and student engagement. And I started using skeletal notes a few years back, just sort of randomly. And I noticed that when I didn't post, even face-to-face, especially face-to-face, I guess, when I didn't post the skeletal notes, students were asking for them. And so I decided to start bringing that into my practice more regularly. And now I do it all the time. Now my routine is I make up my lesson plan, which is a PowerPoint lesson, actually. I make that up and then I go through it again and make up skeletal notes, which really are notes, but they're skeletal because there are fill in the blanks or boxes so the students can kind of follow along. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the ones that Sheila has sent to you. It's not important if you have a difficult time opening up that file while you're still watching this. But you'll notice that on the skeletal notes, when you do see it, that I did put a form or a part of it to include the noticings and things that you can use column. And then I just sort of guide through the lesson with opportunities and space for students to fill in the blanks or add things and maybe even ask questions. So first I make up my lesson, then I make up the skeletal notes. And the way that it impacts student engagement is at least they have something to follow and always think about. Oh, what goes here? What could this be? So even on a very low level, I feel that it brings in some student engagement. So I copied that into my Zoom classroom, and I now always post skeletal notes. And if you have any questions or comments as I fly through these, I'll try and go through a couple of strategies and then we can pause. And I can certainly address any questions that I see in the chat if you want to put some there. I may not just address them when you post them, but I am keeping an eye on the chat as well. So another strategy, which I've already introduced, is the 3-2-1 chat. And I copied this from someone, I forget who, I can't even credit the person that mentioned this, but as soon as I started using it, it changed everything. It made, there was more participation, like closer to 100% participation in the chats. And then occasionally I've kind of said, I may not get to read all of the chat in this session, but I will read the chat script afterwards, because as you know, we do get the chat from our Zoom files afterwards. So I would definitely look at that. And so I feel too, if someone isn't chatting, I can always send them a private little message. Even if it's the second or third class, I can say, I noticed that you're not participating in chat. and so can we chat about that and try and figure out why? And there might be some very good reasons, and so you don't want to be, as I said, judgy about that. But so yeah, so the 321 chat I have found very effective. It's something too that you always want to plan ahead for now, just as you would plan questions or think about in your planning of your lesson, and you'd think about how am I going to bring this to life for these students? What am I going to ask? Then that I would incorporate into my chats of Zoom. So I do plan questions in my chat, and I will share some of that with you a little bit more in the next slide. But I do find that being prepared and planning some questions that I can put into chat is a way to touch base. It's a way to check in with their learning, but it's also a way to just keep them active and not passive, which is always my goal. So a third strategy, so those of you who know me well enough and are on my Facebook page know that I've one of my COVID activities is baking with sourdough, and I've gone crazy about it. I'm pretty obsessed about it, actually. But a baking, and I know, I'm glad you're shaking your head this way and not this way, Sheila. But anyway, a baking term or a cooking term that you might be familiar with is mise en place. And I'm getting unfriendly messages about my internet connection. I suspect it has to do with this storm, but anyway, hopefully we can stay together. Mise en place really means everything in its place. And really you can apply that to being prepared and having everything in its place for teaching as well, and particularly in the Zoom session. But in cooking or baking, this is a picture that I just got off of, the Creative Commons, but here's a picture of, my granola. When I'm making granola, I now have, because I'm baking so much, I now have jars on the counter of my flours and things that I use all the time, but I'll pull out my jars and chop up the ginger and the nuts if I'm going to be using them and so on. So I start to think about, okay, I'm making granola, and let's get everything together and put everything in its place. And it just helps the bake go a little bit better. The time spent preparing does make the process so much easier and fun and engaging. So how does that transfer then to what we're doing here in terms of a Zoom environment? So I took a picture yesterday of my mise en place here. Now, you may not, well, all of you here are fairly tech savvy, but so you may already have a couple of screens on the go, but this is my setup. I started out in the den on a wee little table, and I moved to one side of the dining room table, and now I'm the whole length of the dining room table, taking up the whole spot. Like nobody's eating in here anyway. And I stare out at the street, and I've got the light from the street coming in my window, and I've graduated to 3 screens, so 2 extra monitors with my laptop propped up on one of my cooking books, by the way. And I've got my iPad to the right of me. You can't see it, but I also have a little bar stool beside me that houses my tea, because I don't want my tea to be on the same table as all this tech stuff. And you also can't see it, but I have my pencil sharpener, my pencils, my glass, not glass case, but my cleaning for my glasses, because I'm always, with dirty hands or whatever. I have markers and paper and a hair clip, and like this is my mise en place. So physically, I'm ready for class with my notes. And if you look at those monitors, right now, what I'm looking at is my left screen. The farthest left screen is the screen I'm sharing with you. In my configuration, I call that screen number 2. My middle screen is my Zoom photo gallery and meeting controls and all of that. So that's in front of me. I've moved my chat onto this page too, so that I can read the chat while I'm here. Sometimes that window moves around on me, it gets really busy. And then on the right, on that third big monitor, the highest one, you'll see me turn to the right often. And that's my storyboard. That's the same copy of the PowerPoint lesson that you're seeing that I got on the left. I'm going to stop sharing with you right now. And I'm going to share a different screen with you. I'm going to share my screen that is on the right, which I call my storyboard. Okay, so I'm sharing now screen 3 with you. So you can see it's the same PowerPoint. You notice how I have, hopefully you're looking at that, how I've pulled in my picture here. If I go back a couple of slides, you notice I have my speaker notes, which really is my script. I could have used this. I had this little green visual. I didn't drag that across, but I could have, you know, I had that prepared. Just little subtle things that would help with student engagement. This is a pretty good wake up if I all of a sudden post this little prompt, plan your chats or whatever it is, if I post that on the screen that I'm actually sharing with you. So, so this is my storyboard or my script or whatever you want to call it. And I've started now, every time I plan a lesson, and posting in Brightspace, I started posting 2 PowerPoints. One is the one that I share. The other one is one that I will specifically label script or storyboard, and I'll hide it from my students' view. And so that I've organized it there. So I'm all ready to go for next year. So I'm just going to stop sharing that so you don't have to look at it. But you get the idea of my mise en place, that I'm starting to get all of my ingredients ready so that I can just organize myself better and just make it easier to get interactions out of people, just so we can address all of those challenges. We have to make it difficult for them to be silent. We want to make it difficult for them to be the introvert. We know that passive learning kind of isn't learning, that students really need that interaction and really need not just social interaction, but need to interact with content, and so that they're able to respond to it and actually learn. So that's my mise en place. Okay. And I do have, I did have posted just a page out of my, rather than go to it just because my internet is unstable, rather than open up, say, my Brightspace. Here is just a screenshot of, say, week 12 of one of my math courses. So you can see the table of contents from my course site there. And you can see that, so maybe even in terms of student engagement, I know I could have dolled this up a little bit more by putting in pictures, and I used to try and do that, but by week 12, I might have got pretty lazy, I don't know. But I do always have a week at a glance, and I think students are getting used to, you know, just looking at a glance, what do I need to know? What's on the table for me today? And then I post all of the resources for the week. So there you will see the PowerPoint lesson. And here you see something I call a PowerPoint lesson, but it's script math 7027 week 12. And notice I've hidden that. So I started hiding things in my Brightspace that help me engage the students more. And then of course I'll have the other resources there. So part of my mise en place is getting the course site ready as well, so that it's easy to use and engaging, and you know, students are able to find things. feel that's still a complaint, not necessarily a complaint, but feedback that I get is often, you know, where's this assignment? Where's, you know, this resource that you had, and so on. So I try and make it a little bit easier from them, for them to just be involved and find things. So another strategy, I'll call this number 4, is just pausing, which we'll do now because I've talked really fast and it's halfway through this session. And I think we need to pause and have students check on their learning, and you check on their learning, and just sort of pause and reflect. And the chat feature is a nice way to do that, whether you use chat or a breakout room or another shared document that you have them fill out, or whatever, or a Google form or survey, whatever. But I tend to use the chat feature a lot, because in my mind, it mimics me talking to students in class. And so I would use the chat feature again at a good point, especially 30 minutes into a session that maybe has been fairly dense with information. So I'll say, what are you wondering about? Think about one question that you have right now, and or think about one thing that you've noticed. So get ready, type it in the chat, but don't hit enter yet, because you know me, I'll go 3, 2, 1 chat. What are you wondering about right now so far in what you've seen? Or what's one question that you have? And usually, I never know how long to pause. I usually turn my gallery on to some people that I know have their videos on, and they're like my anchors. So I think, okay, when they've stopped typing, maybe I'll give a few more seconds and then say 3, 2, 1 chat. So that's what I do. But you have to find a way of figuring out how long, you know? And I would say, don't be afraid of the pause. The silence is usually a good thing, because the longer you pause, the more they'll be forced to think about, what are we supposed to be thinking about anyway? You know, so don't be worried about the pause. Okay, 3, 2, 1, chat. Okay. Yeah. Skeletal notes do encourage attendance for sure, or maybe discourage it. I was worried if I sent them out last night too, you might not come. No. Yeah. Okay. The mise en place. Yeah. And Jenny, that's an applicable term for you now too. Okay. And replicating a classroom. Thank you for that. How to draw out the silent types for sure. Yeah. Yeah, you know, even in a breakout group, 4 people not saying anything is not comfortable for sure. Yeah. Okay. So thanks for sharing that. And that's a 4th strategy, is just that check for understanding. Build those in. Maybe I even went too long in waiting half an hour. I felt that I was flying through and speaking quickly, and I'm at slide 9, you know, and I kind of have, you've heard this before, Jenny and Sheila, I know, but I sort of have in my mind a 3-slide rule for me, in that I don't go 3 PowerPoint slides without pausing. I really try and build in a pause after 3 slides. That's my rule. That's what sort of works for me in my math classes, but you make up your own rule that you're comfortable with. But it's easy for us, I think, because we're teachers after all, we love to talk probably. And it's easy for us to talk too much and to spew out all kinds of things and then forget to pause. And the real learning happens in that pause, right? When you're given pause to think about what and interact with the content that you've shared. So yeah, the check for understanding. It's time to check your learning. Check for them to check their learning, because we want them to be independent learners who take the responsibility of checking on, what do I know? You know, those metacognitive skills. What do I really know about Z scores, and what am I wondering about? So yeah, and there are lots of interesting wonderings that we have here. Hopefully we can address those questions if we haven't already. Okay. So I'm not sure if all of you are aware of the whiteboard in Zoom. I didn't stumble across it for the first couple of months. I can't remember when I did, but when I did, man, it was revelational. So if I stop sharing right now, first what I'll do is, I think I'll copy this so you'll see what I'm going to be seeing. Yeah, so actually I already have it there. If I stop sharing, the window that I see in my main screen is this one. I'll see screen one. That was me last night trying to get this picture. Sorry about that. And I was in my pajamas too. Thankfully, it's just a headshot. Here's my middle shot, my middle screen, screen 2. And screen 3 is my storyboard on the right. And then you'll notice that like everything you've got opened is there. So sorry, like you're seeing everything that I had opened, or the top 8 things that I've opened when I took this screenshot. But you'll see there a whiteboard. And that whiteboard is actually really useful. I don't know if you can find a thumbs up or raise a hand. I don't know if I've enabled that for you today, but can you let me know either in the chat or with a heads up, have you used the whiteboard before? Okay, and so I'm just checking that. Haven't, yeah, I know. It took me a couple months, especially for me teaching math. So here's a whiteboard. It's like going to the whiteboard in my classroom. And you may not be able to see all my controls, and it takes some practice too, but you get to change colors. You can use any color that you want, and you can write whatever you want. You can put pictures here. You can put an image and draw over an image. You can circle things. The way that I use it most of all is I'll often take a question that a student has asked from the textbook, and I'll post it, and then I kind of mark up around it. I might underline some clues in the question. Yeah, it's hard to sketch with a mouse. If you have, if you have the touch screen, that makes it easier. Actually, my students haven't complained about me using the mouse too much. I do have an iPad Pro with Apple Pencil that I use as well. And I can share that too. But you know what? My internet connection is often so bad that I cannot share my iPad Pro often. However, I use it a lot for recordings, and I use an app called Explain Edu. And I use the pencil there, but so do take advantage of the annotations, play with that, like even practice, go into an empty Zoom class and share your whiteboard, even though there's nobody there. So make a Zoom meeting, go and just start playing. And maybe even you would plan one. It does help if you have a couple of screens on the go, a couple of monitors. But if you're not comfortable with that, then you may not want to do that. I don't know, but it will take some practice. You have to clear your drawings. You have to remember to do that before you advance to the next step, and so on. So yeah, there's one little technique that I found a couple of months into Zooming, and I just thought, I can't believe I didn't know this was there.
Can I make a comment, Arlene?
Yes.
Your department will buy you an external tablet to draw on. Can you see that? So,
yes.
So this is a this is a Wacom, which I bought on my own and they reimbursed me. I think it was $120, but it's got its own pin. So you're using a pin to do the whiteboard. It's Bluetooth enabled.
Yes.
So if you're doing any schematics or math, I was using it for my business math where you
Yeah.
really need to work out a full screen of numbers. And then of course those can get saved. So those you can capture those and save those off. But what I saw students all the time doing was holding up their phone and taking a picture of the screen.
Yes.
So they had a picture of the math worked out.
Yes.
But regardless, I could capture those. At the end of my session, I would just pare that down to like a 10 slide PowerPoint slide of each of the math that we worked out and save
Yes,
those up.
that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, but the point is our department will pay for them
That's good.
if you ask for them.
I didn't know if I should share this, but yes, they purchased the iPad Pro for me and the pencil. So I use it a lot. They're getting their money's worth, honestly. There is an app, Jeff, that you might be interested in. It's called Explain Edu. And so I can actually record, using that app, I can record solutions in that app on my iPad Pro using my pencil, so similar to your tablet. And then I can just share that link with students. And I do that all the time. Like often if I run out of time in a class and want to share a solution, I will put it on here in that. So yeah, very similar. And if you can, you might have better internet than I do. I don't know why I all of a sudden started running into trouble sharing my iPad Pro. I only started having problems with it, I would say, since Christmas. And I've been on the phone countless times to Bell, our provider, and I can't seem to get a better connection. So if it's the Wi-Fi, I think it's the Wi-Fi, I don't know. But anyway, I can't seem to share my iPad screen with students, which is really unfortunate. I can do it some of the time, but not all of the time. Good comments there. Anyway, hopefully you can figure out something that you can do. For the first couple of months, before I realized that, I brought 10 of my mini whiteboards home and I was holding up whiteboards. I'm not kidding. And so, they might even see it in the reverse, but I was trying things like that because you can only annotate so much. And with a mouse, as Carl says, it's not easy to do. So there's a technique. It might be used differently by each of us in different subject areas or with the tech that we have. Thanks for that. Okay, a sixth strategy. I am counting these, but then I kind of lost count. But anyway, is the breakout rooms. I find them very powerful. And I know, I think it was Carl, I think you mentioned that, sometimes even a group of 4 will be very quiet. So I really plan breakout rooms. It takes a lot of time, but I would say it takes me as much time as when I planned group work in my classes. I love this picture that I took a couple of years ago in one of my classes. And Jenny and Sheila, you may have even seen me because I've seen it before because I've used it, I know, a couple of times. This is exactly what you celebrate as a teacher. The day when your students start teaching other students is wonderful. And so I use my mini whiteboards, and this was not requested by me. Here, a student picks up her whiteboard and helps an adjacent student with a problem. And I'm just thinking, oh my goodness, the learning that's going on here is so powerful. So how do I mimic that? Well, I mimic that by using my breakout rooms and structuring them. So my breakout rooms I spend a lot of time. I think I'm a slow learner when it comes to these kinds of things because I spend way too much time trying to structure the breakout rooms. But I will do a whole bunch of configuration. I will have teams that are sort of base teams. So I establish early on in a course teams of 3 or 4, just as I do in my classroom. And so I will have a plan of breakout rooms, and I will even have them numbered. So 3 or 4 people know that they're breakout number 1, and if they want to change their name, they can. They can even just let me know their name, and I'll put that in. And I keep a record of that, of who my base teams are. So base breakout rooms, for example. But then I always will randomly have teams of 2 or 3, and I find 3 works best. In a classroom, 4 works best as a team, as a small group. But I find 3 is the number for me in a Zoom breakout, because if you have a team of 4 and 2 people don't say anything, it's kind of okay because you have company of, you know, but if you have a 3 and only 1 person is doing the work, the other 2, I think, will start to feel guilty about that and at least be drawn in. And so I try to at least weekly. So if I have 2 classes in a course a week, then it's in one of those 2 classes. If I only have 1 class, then it's in that 3-hour class. I will have at least 1 or 2 random teams in breakout rooms with a very structured assignment. Sometimes it's an escape room kind of activity, like a math escape room activity, or initially, when I'm starting off in the fall, one of my icebreakers, getting to know you activities that I used to do face to face, was called 2 Truths and a Lie. And I know Jenny and Sheila, you've probably seen this before too. But I play 2 Truths and a Lie. If we have time towards the end, maybe we can even play that. But that's a lot of fun in a breakout room. And it doesn't matter if you have 60 people. You can set up 20 breakout rooms and play 2 Truths and a Lie and give them 5 minutes and whatever. It's a lot of fun, and you can do it with content, not with just personal information. And so my breakout rooms are very powerful, I find. Even if you play Would You Rather, you know, or there's a couple of games. Jimmy Farrell has one. What does he call it? Anyway, rapid fire, or various games that you can use. I tend to use cooperative learning strategies. PIES is an acronym that you would hear, and PIES is that acronym stands for. Let me just put that in here. That acronym stands for positive interdependence. So I structure an activity so that they have to interdepend. So they have to depend on one another. So everybody has a role that impacts everybody else's role or ability to do something. And they have to each be accountable. There has to be equal participation. And then we're all doing it at the same time. So I try and implement a lot of the PIES structure into the breakout rooms. That's hard. It's hard to come up with activities. I think I have some good examples now. I have some shared files, some Google Docs that I've created, little assignments like escape room assignments or little assignments where I will have each member doing different parts. I'll just give who's doing this question, who's doing this question. Now together you will all 3 answer this question. So for example, if I was teaching parabolas, I don't know if you remember, but a parabola is like a quadratic curve that looks like that. And so parabolas are interesting because their equations, their names reflect what they look like. So if I say y equals x squared, that's a perfectly shaped parabola at the origin. But if I say x squared plus 2, that parabola moves up 2 units. Or if I say x minus 2 whole squared, well, that parabola moves to the right, or something like that. So I will individually give everybody in the group a feature of a parabola, and then they have to come together and graph one that has all those features together. So that's the best example I can come up with about how you structure things so that you have interdependence and it's positive. They interdepend in a positive way, and that they're all accountable and they're all contributing and participating. And so if you came up with one per course, that would be great, but I try and come up with one per week. So I have a few that I can use in my math class. So yeah, breakout rooms can be used with great effect. Another feature in Zoom that is easy to access and practice it is using Zoom polls. And so if you can set up a poll ahead of time. This is a great check for understanding. But if you use polls, then you're engaging students. My favorite poll is just actually, how confident are you about your understanding of this? Or how do you feel about this topic? And giving them the question, yes, no, or uncertain, something like that. I could play Would You Rather using a poll. And so if I stop sharing right now, or actually I don't even have to stop sharing, but as a host, only I can access my polls feature. So you don't see it, but I can go to polls right now and I can launch a poll that I've already set up. And you will see it now on your screen and you can participate. And I see nobody has voted yet in the poll, but go ahead and, of the following strategies, I think I have 3 questions here, right? Or 4. No, 2 maybe. Anyway, you can go ahead and vote if you like. Which one of the strategies or ones would you likely use? And I'll just wait to see if you're able to vote. Yeah, thanks. That's good. And so that was one that I made up ahead of time. I'm just going to stop that polling, and I can even share the results with you. So you're now viewing the poll results, and you can see, how many people picked 3-2-1 chat, how many people picked mise en place, and so on. I can actually even relaunch the polling if I stay in, or if I stop share and relaunch. I'm allowed to do that. So I can access any poll that I have there. I have another one that I call Check for Understanding. So if I launch that one, just so that you can see it, this is one that I would have ready for every class, and I would use it at least once in maybe just slightly different language. I understand these strategies and will be able to experiment with them in my Zoom class. I try and be specific. I can now graph a parabola of the form y = x squared, yes, no, or uncertain. So I try and be specific about that. So can you see how this would be very helpful? It takes only seconds, but it has a long-term effect of making students realize, oh, I have to be engaged. I have to be listening. I can't walk away, or I can't multitask and be on my Facebook, or because she might have a poll, So yeah, so I try and use that as much as I can. It's easy to use. I used to use poll everywhere. Then the college stopped their license. I think they're getting it back. I don't know. But anyway, Zoom polls are much easier to use. I don't have to go to another website, which means it doesn't tax my internet capabilities. It's just embedded right in Zoom, and it's fairly easy to use. I can even conduct a poll on the fly. I could even make one up right now and just say, do you like this? Yes or no? And so it gets busy. You want to practice at those kinds of things, but you can practice if you just create a fake meeting and try playing with a lot of these things. I think I already mentioned as a strategy sharing the whiteboard, but I'm not sure that you realize that you can also annotate at any time you want. So I took a screenshot of the meeting tools or the annotation tools that you could see here. And so I'm going to annotate right now, and maybe I'll use green or blue maybe. So you can see this little menu of controls, when you're sharing, will pop up. Sometimes they get a little lost. Sometimes you have to hover your mouse right near this "you are screen sharing" prompt to find this. But you don't have to just be in a shared whiteboard to annotate. I could annotate anything that I'm sharing or you're sharing. So have students, and you have to start this early on for them to feel comfortable with, have them get in the practice of sharing their screen, and then you can even annotate that. So if I said, Sheila, I want you to share your screen, and then I could go in and circle some things that I find interesting or that I want to discuss. Especially if we go into breakout rooms, I will often assign a person to create a whiteboard that they will share coming back into and I won't always pick everybody to share, but I will pick a couple. So that is one of my ways of building in accountability into the breakout rooms, is that you create something. It's either a shared file that you're working on, or you have to come up with a shared comment for the chat, or you use the whiteboard and then share that. So sometimes people will just write things down and take a picture, and they'll share that picture, and I can still annotate that picture that they're sharing. And that seems to be what they use the most, actually, is they write down in their own notes, take a picture and share that. Yeah. So annotation and using that whiteboard, have students use them as well as you. And those are things you need to start introducing early on. Teach them that skill, and they'll quickly be past you in it, but teach them that skill early on, and then start using it early on so that they can feel comfortable about using it. Okay.
There's some setting in our own Zoom accounts about allowing others to annotate our shared screen. And we realized pretty quick you have to disable that, or people can anonymously draw all sorts of inappropriate things on top of your slides while you're talking. So,
I must say I haven't had that problem. I probably break a lot of those rules because I let students, I want them to chat privately to me, and I don't even mind if they chat privately to each other, which they're probably doing. But to me, that's like being in class and they're whispering to one another. Sometimes that's a good thing, because it might, after all, be about math. It might, never know. And if it's not, I can try and bring it back. So I know that the caution is not to disable some of those features, not to allow them to chat with one another, not to allow them to annotate and so on, but I use them and I haven't had any problems yet. So I guess, yeah, it comes with a good caution, Jeff. I guess you want to set that up for yourself. And I've never had a Zoom bomb either, but I think it was close. Like in one of my big classes, I don't know if what I was seeing was actually somebody's living room and a lot of shouting and partying going on, or if it was one of my students, or if it was a Zoom bomb. It was only a few seconds, but anyway, I laughed out loud and said, "What was that?" Like without thinking, and then just tried to smooth it over, but it was very brief. And so, in Kahoot too, when we play games, which is our next strategy, Kahoot actually doesn't allow them to name themselves with something that is obscene. And they can still throw in a few things that I'm thinking, is that obscene? Like, I don't even know. I don't know if my language is current enough to recognize that, or, so sometimes if I hear a few snickers, I'll then say, okay, guys, we have to be responsible here and mature here. So let's make sure that what we call ourselves is something appropriate, and I've not really had any problem. So, but you're right, Jeff. Yeah, we need to proceed with caution with those things. So the last one, I know I'm over time now, Sheila, so sorry. But the last one that I would say, oh, look, I forgot to take away my annotations there. Did you see? Oh, yeah, I think that's my annotations still there. Got to remember to clear those annotations before you go to your next slide. So some games, I think Kahoot is a favorite, not necessarily of mine. As a math teacher, I don't like Kahoot because I don't like to say to students that speed is a good thing, because actually I think it's a bad thing. I think the pressure of calculating something quickly and getting the right answer quickly has caused a lot of math anxiety. So I try not to focus on speed in terms of math, and Kahoot does that. So when we play Kahoot, because they love it and we play it all the time, I always say, if you feel that you don't like the speed of this game or whatever, just watch and just kind of enjoy what other people are doing, because that's still engaging, I think. And so I don't put any pressure on everyone to participate, and it goes okay. So I just took a screenshot of my Kahoot page. I do use it, as I said, a lot, but I use other things. I use speed dating in my Zoom class. I used it face to face. I love speed dating. And so I had to figure out a way to use it in my Zoom classroom. And I did. I used speed dating. I just structure it. It's kind of fun. Once you get good at making breakout rooms, you can change those breakout rooms and change them quickly. And it really is like speed dating. So you take your class of 40 people, whatever it is, and you put them into groups of 2, and they've got 1 minute, and you say, okay, the person who goes first is going to be the person who lives closest to the college right now. So they have a brief, you say, okay, they're going to take 10 seconds to decide who goes first or less. And then you give them a task, and then that person is going to take 20 seconds and share their thoughts on the 2 truths and a lie game or whatever. And then you switch, the other person gets a chance. So that's 20, 40, 50 seconds max. So you get to see your date, you get in that breakout pair for 50 seconds. And then I just keep changing it up, and it's kind of fun. It's crazy though, like they get tired of it easily, but it is fun. So you can do a lot of things play a lot of games using the chat, like 2 truths and 1 lie. I've even made virtual jigsaws. So if you use Jigsaw in your face-to-face class, I don't know if that's a game or not, but if you use Jigsaw, you can do that with your breakout rooms as well, and with great effect. So games are very engaging. And so try and think about, well, initially maybe 1 a month, but try and think about even 1 a week. And you don't have to spend a lot of time with it. I'm going to go to the last slide, and then we can stay on a little bit longer, but if anyone has to leave, then, because I am conscious of the time. So the last strategy that I have here is one that I would be happy to spend time with you another time if you want to go into this in detail, but is just basically using shared files. I use Google Docs and Google Forms and Google Sheets regularly, all the time. So going into a breakout room, there's almost always a Google Doc that team has to fill out. So it's shared. I use Google because I'm comfortable with it. I know I should be getting into the Microsoft environment, and I know it's easier to use because it's linked to Outlook and so on. But I'm just not there yet. But I invite you to it's not as good as Google Drive yet. They're copying them after all. But I invite you to start using Microsoft Shared Docs, just because it should be more seamless and friendly for you to use it even right from your Outlook and so on, and right from your Brightspace too. Although we have Google Drive integrated into Brightspace now too. So use those shared files. I mean, I could show you my Google Drive. I keep in my Google Drive, I keep every single class. My whole life is in Google Drive, but I can also keep all the breakout sessions and so on. It's very effective and makes your breakout rooms very structured and certainly encourages active engagement. But there are other things too. Padlet, after all, is a shared file. And I know many of us use Padlet. I'm disappointed in Padlet because they now will only let you store, I forget how many, it's only like 4 or 8 or whatever number of Padlets before they want you to buy premium. And I checked, the college is not going to get a license with Padlet, or at least they said they weren't when I asked. So I've turned my nose up at Padlet, and I started to create a shared doc in Google Drive that looks like Padlet. I'm a Padlet copier, and it serves them right because they didn't meet my needs. So yeah, those are 10 things that I think you can use. I'd be happy to share any of those in more depth. If you ever want to try these out and are having difficulty, you can just pop me a line and I'd be happy to help. I always end my class with a revisit to the learning outcomes. And I think this is really, really important. And it usually happens when I'm going overtime too. So I apologize for that. But it's important that we reflect back and say, did we do what we said we'd do? Can you now describe some student engagement in the Zoom classroom? Can you identify some of the challenges? And are you able to consider some of these strategies to address the challenges that you might have? So that's kind of a strategy as well, but that actually comes from your BOPS lesson planning. So I'll stop there. And if there are any questions or comments, or I'll check the chat in case there, I see, you're welcome to put something even into a private chat to me, or if you want a resource, yeah, and if you have to go, that's perfectly fine. I apologize for going over time.